Okay. Okay, Dr. Lee, I guess we can start and the students will probably join here shortly.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so we're talking about media literacy and disinformation. And the first two links that I had for you guys to review that match up with the PowerPoint no longer work. And this is right now seeming to be kind of a hot topic because there's this idea that there were upwards of 12,000 deaths of people who got the COVID vaccination. And then after the CDC posted this on their website, then a few hours later, they took it down and said, no, there wasn't that many deaths. And it has been steadily increasing according to CDC numbers. So this isn't like somebody else saying, but this has been the CDC, right? So I posted these two stories, one from one news source and one from another news source. And it was two different ideas. Like one idea was the idea that that the CDC is maybe doing something not quite legitimate or not quite up and up, right? And the other one was suggesting that the CDC just didn't know that there weren't that many. So it's a very interesting idea, especially when I look on there this morning for you all, and those two links are now broken links, and it hasn't even been a week since I posted them, I think. So it's to me, it's just kind of where's our misinformation or disinformation at? So we'll go through a little bit different style PowerPoint. And really, this is just one of those topics that what is information, what is the idea of false information is really dependent on not only who's putting that information out there, so we could say CNN versus Fox or something like that, as far as the idea of like national news, but also kind of how we observe it, right? Or our own ideas and our own ideologies and stuff on what we, how we take from this or what we take from this. So let me make sure this is lined up. And I'll show you those two sites too, because I opened all of them so we could have them all to see while we're working, and they're gone. They're just gone. Okay, where's my web pages? Here you go. Let's share. See, the site can't be reached. And like I said, I don't even think I had it up for a week because I was really trying to find something other than COVID to talk about again, but it's really the gift that just keeps on giving, I suppose. So the one is the CDC here on whoever's news channel this is. And then this other one here, I know this second one here was Reuters, the fact check VAERS. And I can't remember who the first one's from. It might have been Fox, something like that. I was just trying to get the same story from two different sources, and so that's what most of those things are. But like I said, those are gone now, so it's rather comical. So medial, it should be media. Excuse my spelling. Media literacy, and then this idea of misinformation or disinformation. So literacy is defined as the ability to read and write in one's sort of native tongue, right? And then we have a large percentage of our population in the US, which is why I kind of included it here, because it kind of fits with this idea of mis or disinformation, is this thing called functional literacy, or functional illiteracy rather. And it's the idea that people cannot read. I think we're up to sort of close to, I want to say like 60% in the US of people cannot read at their age or grade level. Does that make sense? So people in high school are not reading at a high school level. They're reading at like a grade school level or junior high level, right? So this is happening across the US, that people cannot read at their grade level. And I couldn't find any statistics within your nation, so I'm not sure if you're having this. So you can, of course, stop and let me know if you're seeing a similar trend. But we are facing this. So if the idea of literacy is to be able to read at our level, our native tongue, read and write, and media is being able to not only find that information, but read it and sort of evaluate it. If we're having trouble understanding just at our own level, right, we're going to maybe then struggle with this media literacy. Does that make sense? So that's why I included these numbers. Are any of your schools or colleges, K through 12 or any of that, are you experiencing this sort of functional illiterate crowd? Have you noticed this? Maybe no? Okay. That's all right. We don't want to. So I think that's fine. So here are these cases. Oh, it was the Gateway Pundit and Reuters. Um, and like I said, now the links are not working. So let me just close that. And then these were just sort of the image of those two stories, right? And I actually, if you want them, I did download these stories. I saved them as like a print page or a PDF just in case, because sometimes the news changes so quickly that we don't have it. So if you want them, just send me a quick email through Canvas and I'll send them to you. Okay. Because they are sort of hard to get hold of otherwise. So we'll skip this one and let's move to our next set here in a second. Come on back in. So this idea of misinformation and disinformation. So these two things are really quite overlapping. The uh, the section or the part where they deviate is sort of the idea of intent. Okay, so Merriam-Webster defines information as sort of knowledge obtained from study, instruction, or investigation. So information is knowledge and facts. Misinformation is the wrong information or a false account. So sometimes when we story tell, we don't tell the story just as the story is. We tell the story sort of with our observations included, right? And it's not to provide misinformation, but it's how we process information, right? So I might add something when I'm telling the story. So oftentimes I'll go back and look at whatever it is I'm telling people. So that way I try not to add my stuff to whatever it is. Does that make sense? And then disinformation is the wrong information or false information, but done intentionally. Okay, so here's what happened, but I'm going to tell people this because I don't like what happened. Does that make sense? So there's intent by why I told people a different story. Is that kind of straightforward for everybody? Yeah. Okay. So think of dis or malinformation. I've seen it listed as too, is the intent to give this false information. And darn COVID, during last year, we talked about COVID, we talked about like education and leadership and things like that in COVID. And no matter how hard we try to get away from this thing, it just keeps coming back. And so when I was looking for similar stories on similar news, on different news sources, almost all of it had to do with COVID. I couldn't find another overlapping idea. So you have these as well, and these did populate. Let's see here. This one is that Unfox News on the vaccinations, and this one is on. Where's my Al Jazeera? There it is, and it's really interesting. Like this one here on lowering vaccine doses. I couldn't find anything comparable in any other source, which I thought was really interesting, because they're talking about people who maybe had some of the vaccines, I don't know if you all know, but some of the vaccines, you have to have 2 doses of it. And so this one was talking about how some of the people didn't even have like half a dose, or only had like half a dose. So not even just one of the 2, but like half of a one, right? And how they're doing better that way than if they were getting the 2 full doses. So this seems like it could be important or interesting or need further study or something. And I really couldn't find it anywhere else. So I did as close as I could, um, with this vaccination rates. So it's still about the idea of sort of the vaccination rates, but I couldn't find anything comparable for that, right? So do you have access to, tell me, what news organizations, um, how does news work where you're at? Like, do you have access to all the same news? Like, if I send you all this, can you see this, or can you find these things on your own? Let me know. How do you access news where you're at?
Do you mean by internet?
You do it by internet?
Yes.
And do you have full access?
If I'm using the Wi-Fi university, sometimes they block some website that we can so there's website that we can access, and there's no website that we can access. So
Okay.
that depends.
Okay. And I wasn't sure because um I know even some browsers, like I use probably about 4 different browsers when I look for things, because when I'm looking for stuff like for you all to look things up like this, I can't find it in just like something like Chrome. So I use Chrome, I use Opera, I use like all of these different browsers because I can't get the same information off of just one. So even browsers will often limit. Okay, so you can't see it. Yeah, so this is one of those things that you all have to kind of find stuff for you, so to speak, because it's goofy. News is goofy. That's my best description of it without being like rude or anything. So this one, of course, I know you all don't have time to read all these things because you already have your own classes going. You have all of these Susie things that you're doing. So I know you get bogged down. Stop coming up there. But that Al Jazeera, that one to me is just a really kind of pivotal information going on. So, if you get the chance to look that one over, I don't think it would be amiss to read that one. Then I tried to get away from COVID, like I said, and I found this Larry Elder story. And so he is a I think he's a radio talk show host. I think that's kind of his day job now. I don't know what he did before. I'm really not that familiar with him. But California, the state of California, um, the citizens of the state did a petition to recall the governor that's in charge now. They did not approve of the job the governor was doing, and so they did this petition, and they had enough voter signatures to recall him, which means his election is kind of not valid, and they need a new sort of emergency election. All right, and this Larry Elders is one of the people that wanted to run against him in California. And the the people in charge of voting, the California recall and the elections officials, they said, no, you're banned. You're not allowed to run here. And they didn't cite any law for it. So he took them to court, and he won, and he can be on the ballot, right? So that's these 2 stories. And all it is one's from Yahoo, um, and one is from the Epoch Times, right? So I'm trying to find two typically ideological different news stories for everybody, right? Um, the Epoch Times tends to be a more conservative news outlet, and Yahoo tends to be a more liberal news outlet. So that way you have both stories. Through this whole thing, understand I'm not telling you which one's right, which one's wrong, what's good, what's bad. That's all for you all to decide for yourself, right? This is not that sort of thing. And then these other readings were just this is mini texts talking about what misinformation and disinformation is. This one here was a media literacy and critical thinking. And this is specifically, I think this was from is this one the DOJ? Oh, Homeland Security. And this is the US government, or one section of the US government's ideas about what's true and false, right? I'm thinking if you were to look, you might find something similar in within your own nation about media literacy and misinformation or disinformation. And so it's just, I mean, it's just interesting the way that all of this works. So as far as I can tell, this is a much more worldwide event. I don't know that it's hit sort of every nation, if you think of it that way, but it is across the globe that different governments are talking about this misinformation that was out there. I just saw a news story yesterday morning, I think it was. And I can't remember I can only remember sort of the heading, and it was talking about an Islamic group was talking about the negative functions or the negative effects, if you will, from the COVID vaccination, and Facebook banned them, right? So that's what I'm saying. This is something that each person has to look into, because it is not, it's our own, if that makes sense. So the partial vaccinations, and then this one, as COVID cases increase, so do the number of vaccinations. So two different kind of looks at the same thing. This news story here is talking about a small, minute amount of vaccine is beneficial to preventing COVID. And this one's saying as more people are vaccinated, the actual onset of the illness is increasing. So two completely different looks at this, right? And then we have this claims about protecting against misinformation. So all of these, you should be able to link out to these. Let me see here. As long as they didn't take them down on me when I wasn't looking. It'll probably take a minute to load. Yeah, so taking action against misinformation across our apps. So this is Facebook's ideas about misinformation and protecting against misinformation. Does that make sense? And so each of these is Breitbart has an idea of misinformation, and Fox News has an idea of misinformation, and The Guardian has an idea of misinformation. And sadly, I think most of them are all on COVID. Because like I said, that's the one that it just won't go away. But that's this idea, the idea of misinformation. Who is it misinformation for? Does that make sense? So think of you and your family. Is there any recent news story, or you and your friends? Maybe even you and your instructors or your military leadership. I don't, you think of it. Is there like an event occurring, or a news story, or something that's occurring that you think of it as maybe valid information, and the other person or people are thinking of it as misinformation or some sort of lie? Are any of you experiencing that? Or vice versa? You could think it's misinformation and the other person could think it's valid. I don't have a preference. I just want to know, is this occurring for you somewhere? What do you think?
I think the misinformation occurs to me sometimes, but we have we have to accept it.
You have what? I'm sorry.
But we have to accept it. Like this one time we have
Oh, you muted. You muted.
uh we have some
Oh, I think there might be coming something else. So in Malaysia, our government had introduced an app called okay, let me give this a try. Is it Sebenaria? Is that right?
Ya, sebenarnya.
Okay. To filter the fake news on social media is meaning the truth.
Ya.
Okay. Now let me ask you this. Does it work? Like, are you missing
There are
the
only
false?
little people using it, I guess.
Okay.
Only a little people. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Sebenarnya in English is the truth, isn't it? Yeah, the truth.
Okay.
Dot my, yeah, like that.
Okay.
And I guess only a little of Malaysian using it. You know, they like to read things on Instagram and Twitter a lot, but not in the news, in the confirmed sources. Yeah, right.
Okay.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Who filters it? Is the government? Does the
That's
government filters it? Does the government decide which is false and which is true in this case?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is the government.
could not to question your government, all of our governments, right? Could our governments, if they give us an app like this, could they maybe filter and give us only what they want us to see, even if it's not maybe truth?
I've seen this kind of thing in movies, but I don't know in
Okay.
our real life.
In real life, okay. And I don't know either. That's why I question, and that's why I tell you that you have to go look and find kind of the due diligence and find some of these things for yourself. And that's part of this new uh I'll use discussion because it's a nice word. That's part of the new discussion about this idea of misinformation, is that both sides are saying, because it is kind of it really is kind of just a two-sided argument. The one side is saying the stuff that's being blocked is information, and the ones who are doing the blocking are saying, no, it's not, it's misinformation. So there's that sort of dichotomy. And so, like I said, we're the ones tasked with going out and finding kind of what's truth. So I know in Turkey, the government would control the truth. Okay, see, and that's what I'm wondering, is if there's that kind of thank you, Nilüfer. I was wondering if there would be that kind of control on what truth is. If we look at something like Cuba right now is having a good deal of unrest, and the government in Cuba and some folks in the US are saying that the only reason that the people in Cuba are unhappy is because they're missing or lacking COVID vaccinations and medical treatment. And the people on the streets who are saying I'm unhappy are saying I'm unhappy because of the government. So there seems to be, again, that sort of dichotomy of where officials, leadership is kind of saying one thing, and the people who are feeling these experiences are talking about it in a different way. I guess we'll see what comes out in the wash on maybe what the idea of truth is in this situation, right? But this is kind of this is exactly the idea of misinformation. So we're kind of limited to certain sources. Like you were saying that folks use like TikTok and Twitter and things like that to get the news, right? I don't know if TikTok and things like that are any more or less legitimate than some of the news sources, right? I seriously read, oh my God. I don't read them every day, but I have probably like 20 news channels saved because they're all different, right? I can't get a same story, even if I look at similar ideological newspapers, right? So if I look at two similar conservative news sources or two conservative or two liberal news sources, I often get different stories with all four of them. So it's not like I'm not even, and that's why I was having trouble finding stuff for you all that kind of overlapped, is there's just this really, there's the disconnect. And so how do we determine which is the idea of misinformation, right? um Even I like this one because it says science, but even science, at least superficially, has moved into an idea of consensus or majority. If the majority says something is right, then it must be right, versus a scientific discovery or a scientific when science is disproven for some reason. So it's very interesting how this kind of all occurs, right? um let's see, I have my chat right there, so I can't see anything. So this Larry Elder, do you think, did you all read this news story first, these two news stories, or did you not have a chance? Because we might do it a different way if you didn't have a chance. Okay, maybe not a chance. Within your own electoral systems, have you found that media covers the candidates in different ways? Let's do it that way. So like you have candidate A and candidate B. Do they talk about, do they tend to favor maybe a candidate? Anything like that? What do you think? Do you not have typically more than one candidate for something? Because I might be just off on my thinking about this. Okay. Different news channels, different stories and facts. Yeah, okay. Just like, hang on. Just to spice up their stories. Oh yeah. Have any of you ever read the Sun? It's one of the premier English papers. Let me pull this up for you all, because the Sun is just, it's like a raunchy, you might need to cover your eyes if you're sensitive. Yeah, and yes, sometimes media is biased towards some particular candidates, and we see that a lot. Typically we see some newspapers side with one side and then other newspapers side with the other side, right? And that tends to be the more common outcome. And usually if a news outlet is ideologically similar to a candidate, they don't usually sort of bash that candidate, they bash the other side. This one's image intensive, so we'll give it a second to load up. And even this channel, no, I'm not signing up for your news. Some of their stories, I swear, are darn near pornographic. Um, so it's all about stars. Once in a while, they have a real news story at the top. So here they're talking about sort of the uptick in COVID cases. They often have these kinds of things. But then it's a lot of this, so celebrities and who they are and what they're doing. And where's all the, every time I look at this, yeah, Love Island, I have no idea what this is, but this is always a top news story on the Sun. I do believe it's an English reality show, but other than that, I don't know. And Love Island, they don't always mean, they mean it typically in a more carnal sense, let's say it that way. So often it's more scantily clad than this. Of course, the day I show you all, they don't have any half nudie pictures. What a chip. Two-headed snakes. Love Island stars. Pretty sure there aren't supposed to be crocodiles there. I could care less about the news stories. Because I look at this one almost every day, and it's almost always women with even less clothes than this on usually. So, but not today because I'm showing you, and then I just look goofy. Yeah, it's usually closer to this. Often a little bit. Oh, so we're getting there towards the end. Usually it's from the first pages. But this is considered a legitimate news source. And most of it is what this star is doing, what that star is doing, all the happenings on Love Island, right? And so the idea of legitimacy then is really kind of to some degree in the eyes of the beholder, right? Rather than maybe the people who are producing the news. And again, that's why we're tasked with looking at sort of how do we find the information? So there's always a ton of information out there. But how do we find sort of those legitimate sources? Just because it's national news with reporters doesn't make it maybe valid, doesn't make it maybe factual. So if media literacy means that individuals can find, read, and analyze and evaluate media, do we need to worry about misinformation? So what I'm asking here is, if some source is giving information that is false, does it matter if we have access to millions of sources of information? Does it matter if there's false information out there? What do you think? And here's kind of an example of why I ask. This is not a bash. This is just another system of beliefs. So I'm not making fun. You take from it what you want. This over here. Okay, here it is. And then maybe I'll pull up images of this one. That might be better. Yeah, something like this. So there's the at least that hasn't been disproven, the scientific idea that the earth is round, right? Or roundish. I mean, it's bumpy and kind of not a true orb. But the earth is roundish and spins on an axis and then rotates around the sun. And we know this by looking at the stars and that we have satellites in orbit and these types of things, right? Then there's a group of individuals who talk about this idea of inner earth. And this is the idea, and I honestly, I can't tell you where this one comes from because I've never quite understood it, but it's this idea that there's a hollow earth. So we actually live in the center of the planet and all the stars and planets are in here with us and we're in the center. So the sun, everything, and we're inside this orb. Okay. And then there's the folks who believe that the earth is flat and the moon landing, the International Space Station and the images we get, they talk about the idea that these have been falsified, that these are not real images. It's that Hollywood and the government make it up to trick us into thinking the earth is round when it's actually flat. And I understand their rationale. They talk about the reason that this is true is they go back to the Bible. And in the Bible, it says all corners of the earth. And if you will, in a round house, there can't be corners, so to speak. So that's where they come up with this idea that it has to be flat because God has said this thing, right? So, like I said, this isn't a bash. This is just the way, this is just these different ideological beliefs, right? If I believe in the science one, then this inner earth or hollow earth and flat earth are misinformation, correct? If I believe the science, then these two are not true, okay? So in saying that, is it okay though that this misinformation stays out there? Is it okay that this stuff stays posted on the internet? What do you think?
I think
I
it's
think
not
it
okay.
is not okay. But we also can get the confirmed sources that the truth of the stories.
Right, we can, and we can find 1,000 stories on flat earth if we believe, or 1,000 stories on inner earth if we believe, or probably quite a few more stories on the science side of the earth is round and rotates and all of that. So yeah, there's other information. So should we take down the stuff that we perceive isn't true? Because the people who believe in flat earth believe that their belief is true. So what's not true? Go ahead. No, I thought I heard somebody's mic. No? Go ahead.
Flat Earth. I've seen so many of this in social media like TikToks or even in memes, Instagram and Twitter.
Okay.
I assume that the people only like joking about this, but I don't know that it is a true belief. Like I'm surprised.
Oh, I see. Yeah. No, it really is. There are. Yeah, that's why I said I'm not poking fun. People believe this, people believe the inner earth, people believe the round earth. And I've seen some interviews with not with the hollow earth folks so much, but with the flat earth people. I've seen them talk with people who believe the earth is round. And the people who believe the earth is round cannot convince the flat earth people that the earth is not flat. So is it misinformation if these people believe this to be fact.
I'm sorry, but
Go ahead.
Okay, okay.
I'm sorry, but we have an astronaut. They are called as Dr. Sheikh Muzaffar, and he posted the Earth is round and not flat because he made the video when he was up there, when
Yeah.
he was at the space. So from that, I believe that the Earth from that the Malaysia has not thought about the Earth is flat.
Yeah. And I don't know if you know, but when you measure over a certain distance, your sights won't line up, right? So over so many feet, because there's a curvature to the Earth's surface, if you're trying to line up laser sights, after so many feet, they will not line up because of that curve. So then it's going off like this instead of where if it was flat, it would go right into that other one, right? So we have these tendencies to believe the photographs from the International Space Station, right? We tend to believe that some of us tend to believe that Elon Musk is sending up all those satellites for internet, right? So this is really down to what we believe. And so if some people believe, would it be right to take off the stuff about flat Earth if those people believe the Earth is flat? Should they be allowed to have it? They believe it. Yeah.
I think it's up to them to believe it or not, because the Earth will not change if they say it flat or round. Yeah,
Right.
it's their own belief. We all have our own belief. Maybe they have it from the movies, sci-fi movies, taught them like that. Just something that I want to say, that if you believe something that is not right, or people do not like it, please do not
Right.
preach to other people about it. Just keep it to yourself.
Well, and
That's all.
that's the thing with the internet and all the social media sites. Right now, we can post all our opinions out there for everybody to read. I'm not a big social media lover. I do have a couple of accounts because I have to have them. Like I have a Twitter account. Seriously, I had a Twitter account for I don't know, 5 years, and I didn't even know I had it. But then for my for the JM program, we wanted to put our program stuff on Twitter and LinkedIn, and here I had a Twitter account already set up. So I don't use I don't have a Facebook account. I watch some YouTube videos. I have a LinkedIn. I don't have us. I haven't even looked at that Twitter since I made sure it was working for the program. I've never looked at it since. I don't even think I have anything liked on there aside from my program. I don't love social media. I just don't love it. And that does it because we have all these ideas and we can share them. They're all out there. And you're right. Fact absolutely doesn't change anyone's perception. If I believe this one thing to be true, that's my personal beliefs. It's kind of like the idea of faith. Science can say this, that, and the other, but if I have faith in God, then the science isn't going to disrupt that, right? That faith is going to remain steady. That's the whole idea behind faith. Now, some of us will be swayed with, I would say, probably some facts if we're presented with them sort of on a kind of face-to-face level. It might change our ideas, but typically our ideas are our ideas, and other people saying it's not true or it's wrong doesn't usually make a difference in that. And especially if the people who tell us our ideas are wrong, if they're particularly mean or heinous or anything like that, right? Then we definitely tend to shut down and not listen to them, whether it's facts or not. So so the big talks now is that misinformation is a problem. So the idea of information, or for information is just, I guess, lack of a better word. So there's this stuff written all over the internet, Facebook, news sources, whatever media we're talking about. Um, and some of it might not be fact, some of it might be, but who cares if it isn't? Why is that a problem? If we have our own ideas and we can go read and look at and watch and talk to other people, and we can do all this stuff, um, why is it a problem? Oh, yes.
Problems of misinformation.
Yeah. Is it so that we're being told that misinformation is a problem and we have to get
Yeah.
rid of it, right?
Yeah.
Is it a problem? Or what is the problem with it? If we can, so if I don't like what, let's see, what kind of news sources did I have up here today? If I don't like, if I don't like what the Gateway Pundit is saying, or I don't like what Facebook is saying, can't I just stop reading it?
Sometimes misinformation affect others' lifestyle, maybe their health, like the
Okay.
vaccination. People sometimes just tell jokes that, when they inject the vaccine in their body, and then they update in their social media, I'm done installing the microchip in my body. But some people that understand that thing, like he's taking it serious. So
Okay.
it's like, I don't want that vaccine. It's just a microchip, or it's planned to detect what I'm doing or where am I, like that.
Right.
Yeah. So
And
it
I get
affects
that because of
lifestyle.
health, right? Health or lifestyle. Um, and that's why I was trying to give like two sources, because for every, I mean, for every story on this side, I can always find a story on that side. So that's why I wonder if it's an issue. If the only story out there is not true, then potentially we could have some health consequences. And then this other question, which we probably won't go over too much because I don't want you all to miss your break and stuff before your next session, is at what point are we, the consumers, responsible for the information that we consume, right? So if I only read Facebook for news, when is it my fault for not looking at something else for my news? Or when is it my fault for believing the misinformation? Are we accountable for consuming misinformation? Does that make sense? And I won't open it up to you, but just can you keep that in mind? Um who or when are we responsible? So we always blame it's the media's fault, and there's a million media sources. When does it become the consumer's fault for not looking somewhere else? So, okay, if vaccines do not contain microchips or change DNA or any of those things, when is it my responsibility to go look at the other sources of information that says this is not true? Does that make sense? So kind of think about it on those terms as well, that yes, the misinformation is out there, but that also we might be at least somewhat responsible for our own misinformation if we don't look at anything else. Sound good? Sean and I post the wrap up for you all for Friday already. And I did include, I don't know the channel owner's name on YouTube, but I did include a link it looked like pretty much all of the Schoolhouse Rock videos. So if you liked those and you want to see them, that link is in the wrap up session with the recorded messages and the last discussion forum. Okay. So you have it if you're interested. If you're interested in any of the sources, download them before Canvas lets you go out of the program. So that way you have it if you want the information. Okay. All right. Nilofer, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee. This was our last academic live session
Yes.
with Dr. Lee. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Students, there's no point of turning your cameras on right now because the session is over.
It's
we
okay.
would like to see your faces during the sessions. And if you have any questions for Dr. Lee, please, you can email her on Canvas. You are still responsible for the program until Sunday. So you are still to finish your assignments. We're going to thank Dr. Lee, and I'm going to give everyone else a break. So we have 8 minutes break until 9. We have our next session at 9. Let me stop the recording here.